Okay, this is part one of my series, my motorcycle mechanics series, and this is how to fix your front wheel, how to fix your front end after a crash or a wreck where your wheel isn't aligned straight, where it's out of alignment or bent, or you find your handlebars look really bent after a crash, a wreck, or a spill or a wipeout. This is the proper way to do it. I will cover everything. I'll be really thorough. And this is for everybody. I just thought that I better put a thorough video out there of how to do this. This is part one of many. I'll have different videos on how to do almost everything on a bike, street or dirt or whatever. The particular bike I'm working on, using as an example, is my fabulous YZ450 F, and it is I wiped out the other day pretty hard. I crashed pretty good. Got a huge bruise on my leg from it, but I picked it up and the whole front end was out of whack. So I've already done this once. I've already straightened it, but I didn't film it. So this is just so everyone can see, and I'll go through it again thoroughly about how to do it from first step to last step. Okay, just so everyone else can see it now. So yeah, this is, this front end is straight, but I'm just going to go through the procedure again, so everybody can see. Just pretend it's all bent up. Just pretend the wheel, so you can see. Well, it actually looks kind of bent now that it's off to the side, but see, your fender always is a little bit cocked to the side. That's normal. That's your fender doesn't tell how straight your wheel is anyway. But that's been straightened. But just pretend the wheel is off to the side for now. Okay. I'll go through it all. If somebody has a bent up one, I can I can show you right from beginning to end on a bent bike too. But here is how to do it, how to straighten your whole wheel, handlebars, everything else. Okay. Put this down where everyone can see. Hopefully that's good for now. The tools you're gonna need, gonna be a torque wrench here. Probably best to get an inch-pound torque wrench for so you can be more accurate. Other tools you're gonna need are ratchet, extension with a 10 mil wrench. Sometimes a 12 mil is needed. I've got an 8 mil socket here for my plastics. Some street bikes require, the odd ones have torques I've seen, but rarely. And sometimes Allen keys are needed, 6 mil Allen key. You might need a 5 mil Allen key for certain plastic pieces. There's an extension there. And also, you need a breaker bar here for after. That's for the handlebars. I'll show you after where we need that. Okay, so that should be almost it. You might need a screwdriver, but rarely. On older bikes, you might need a Phillips screwdriver to remove some plastics. Okay, so this is what we do. Oh, actually, so my bike's on the center stand here. To start, though, I'm going to take it off the center stand. I'm just going to put it on the ground. So I had to do it with one foot because my other leg is completely there we go. My other leg is completely sore. I can't bend it, so I'm doing this gibbled today. Okay, put your bike on the side stance. The wheels are on the ground. There's my trusty triangle. there. Put that into the axle hole. Alright. Okay. Now. Okay. Put your bent bike sitting on its wheels now, okay? Now, first thing we're going to do... Jeez, am I ever slow at this? First thing we're going to do is loosen off these little bolts right here. This one and this one. We're just going to loosen them because they're torqued. So we'll go ahead and loosen those off so we can, while the wheels are on the ground. It gives us a little bit more something to work with there. Okay. So I'll put my camera down here. Just going to loosen off that. And you want to do it in alternating sequence. So kind of loosen off one and then go to the next one and kind of turn that one like a half turn, then the next one a half turn. You know, alternate them when you loosen them off as well as tighten them. It's really important that you do it in alternating segments. Just because, you know, or else it'll clamp unevenly. You know, you'll stress out the actual metal in the boss, and that's not good. You just want it all even. So, well, I went ahead. You know what? I went ahead and loosened it all, but you can just loosen it, and then undo them after. But okay, so those are loose. Okay, now I'll go ahead and put it back on the center stand, and don't worry about anything yet. Just loosen off those. Bike's back on the center stand. That little triangle fell out. Now, what we're going to do, so these bolts are now loose. Now I can just move them by hand because I went ahead and loosened them right off. It don't matter because you're going to be realigning it anyway. Okay, let's make sure both wheels stay off the ground. Now, what you want to do is you want to loosen off these guys. 1, 2. Those guys. 1, 2, like that. Okay, and then you also want to do the other side. So loosen off those again. Alternating sequence. You want to loosen that off like a third of a turn or whatever. Then go down to this one, a third of a turn, third of a turn, third of a turn, just until it's alternate them until you've got it completely loose. So I'll go ahead and do that. It don't matter. Before you begin all of this, good idea is actually to wash your bike. You want to try to get all the dirt and dust away from the fork tube that you can. You want to make sure that that's all really clean because you don't want any dust or dirt or any little rock particles getting in the way. Okay, so that side's loose. I went ahead and loosened that side. Now this side, and I'm just alternating. I'm probably one of the more particular people out there that pay more attention to the details, but that's never a bad thing. Okay, so those are loose by hand, right? So you could theoretically, now the fork tube is now free down here on the bottom triple clamp. It's now free. It can, if this was loose, this would be able to turn in here. Okay, so that's what you're doing. You're loosening off the bottom triple clamp so that the fork tubes have the freedom to move and twist in there. Okay, you don't want them moving up and down. That's why we don't loosen these off. You don't want them moving up and down unless you look here and you find that these are really uneven, but that's usually not the case. and I'll cover that in a different video. One thing I forgot to do, which is probably makes it easier, is I'll take my 8mm wrench here, and I'm going to take off my front number plate. Just because we're dealing with gonna deal with the handlebars and stuff today too, and that'll make it a little bit easier to access. Make sure that's on the loosening side. Okay, it's just a little 8mm bolt. Loosen that off and take it right out. Now, always put your bolts and stuff like that somewhere where you're not going to lose them. Sometimes, if possible, I try to put them back into the, screw the bolts back into the hole after the part's been taken off. Take off this little guy here. Unclip your hose, your cables and stuff. Okay, now number plate's off. Anyway, I might have forgot to mention these bolts down here. That's your right side axle holder clamp bolts. This is your axle holder down here, this big black thing. These bolts are the things that clamp your front axle in place. Okay, so we've got those loose. We've got these loose on both sides. Okay, these are still tight. Okay, like I said, those stay tight as long as your forks here are in the right position up and down, like this way. Those will always stay tight. You don't have to loosen them off. Okay, so went ahead and removed that. So now everything's ready to go here. What I'll do is now we're gonna start to realign it. So I'm gonna put my camera down here. Hopefully you guys can see this from where I put this camera. I will kind of set it there so you guys can see. Now we want to gently take it off the center stand. Okay. Take that thing away. Get on your bike. Now, as you squeeze the front brake lever, what you want to do is just pump your front end up and down a few times. Okay. My bike tends to walk back a bit when I do that, but that's fine. Just pump it up and down. You know, it might take a few more times than others. It all depends. Sometimes it'll just rock back right away. Sometimes it takes a few more pumps. Okay. Now once you've done that, you know, you could do it like, you know, a few more times, like I said. But now that that's been done, your front end, your forks should be aligned, because that aligns them. That motion there will self-align the front end. Okay. Now put the bike back on the center stand. Now, first thing you want to do, okay, now that we've pumped them, the tubes are aligned now. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and we'll just snug up. We're just gonna snug up the bottom triple clamp pinch bolts. We're just gonna snug them up just so they're snug, just so the tubes don't move. Okay. And we'll torque them after. But for now, we're just making sure that they're tight, that they're not going to move when we do the next step here. This is just so that you don't want to tighten very much. Just snug them up just so that the clamps pinch a little bit. Okay, so they're snug. Next thing we do here, this will align your front axle. It will align everything to do with your axle and the bottom fork tube itself, like the bottom stanchion. Your lug and everything will be aligned. So what I recommend too is, you know, if you press this, see how mine moves freely? You just want to make sure that your thing moves freely. Your bottom lug moves freely on the axle so that it's allowed to move, so that it's not caught up on anything. Okay. Now, I'll tell you this. A few weeks ago, I bent my front rotor. So, I'm just using the section of my rotor here that's straight, because I don't want to put anything through the caliper that's going to tweak it for now, just to keep everything in perfect alignment. I'm going to use the 270 degrees or so of the rotor that is good, that doesn't bind up in the caliper, so that I get an accurate alignment. So if you're wondering why I don't let the wheel spin, you know, 2-3 times around, that's why. I'm only letting the wheel spin about a half revolution, and it's just because my rotor's bent. Otherwise, you'd let it spin, you know, 2-3 times. 1, 2, 3 times. Doesn't really matter. Just as long as your wheel's spinning. Okay. I'll show you. You let the wheel spin and then you hit the brake. Get this freaking camera lined up here. Okay. That's about as good as it's going to go. Okay. Now with your hand on the handlebar on the front brake, just kind of hit it a few times just to kind of make sure it's pumped up, which it should be already, but you never know. Okay, now what you want to do is you want to spin the wheel. Like I said, normally you'd spin it for 1, 2, maybe 3 revolutions, and then what you want to do is you want to hit the brake and just let it abruptly clamp and stop the wheel, okay? So there's 1, 2, there's 3. So I did it 3 times. That's more than enough. Okay. So that will now align everything to do with the front wheel and make sure that the bottom lug is in the proper location. So now that that is done, what I want to do, it's hard for me to kneel down here, is I just want to tighten up, just make these snug right where it is. Try not to bump the bike or anything. Okay, so those are tight by hand. Those are snug by hand. So now I just want to put a lever on that just to tighten it a bit. Just like I said, just to make it snug. I want to try to put my my camera up here somewhere. I don't know if that's, you guys probably can't see that far down, but anyway. Just going to snug these up because I just don't want them to move. I want them to be in that particular, I want my lug clamp to be in that particular position on the axle when I put the bike on the ground. Alright. So that is now snugged. Okay, we don't have to worry about that moving anymore. Now all I'm going to do, I'm going to torque the bottom triple clamp pinch bolts in the exact same way that I was tightening them and loosening them before. in an alternating pattern. What we want to do actually is torque it in 2 stages. Now this is kind of straight to code here, but you don't always have to be so particular, but I like to be. Standard torque for those is about 15 foot-pounds. That equals out to about 180 inch-pounds. So I like to put it at 150 and do it in those 2 stages. That way you get a nice even clamp. So there, I'm at 130 there, 140, 150. I'll lock it in place, and then I'm just going to see what side of the clamp looks more spread, and then I'll start from there. So that clicked, alternated on the other side. Now I just want to go back and make sure that they're both going to click again without moving. And that's where I stop. So boom, boom. Those are now torqued on the first stage. Now I go to this side. Okay, now I do the same thing. I torque it in alternating steps. I wish I could bring that camera here and show you. But, okay, so those are now both torqued to 150. So now I'm just going to go to 180, the full torque. Okay, so where's my 10? So that's my 10 mark. There's 180. Lock. Okay. Now, I kind of do the same thing. I just look to see which end of the clamp is open more, and I start there. So, see, it moved just a little bit. You want it to move some. It has to move some to be a proper torque against friction. So, we'll just go alternating until they don't move. And then you're pretty much there. Okay, the other side. Click, click. And I want to show you something close up. Always make sure that your torque wrench is on a 90-degree angle here. You don't want it cocked this side like that or like this and try to torque it. You always want the torque wrench straight, perpendicular to the fastener. Okay. Okay, so now those are torqued. Okay, so your front end is straight now. The only thing we didn't torque was the bottom, but we can do that after we let the bike down. We can torque those up. Now to the handlebars. Now if you've done all that and you realize your handlebars are still all screwed up, you might need maybe a straight edge. Just to, what did I do here? Okay, you might need, just to help you judge it. I usually just kind of like do it by eyeball. But it never hurts to have a straight edge here like this to line things up with. You know, it helps you just judge it by eye and stuff. Your eye is actually the most precise tool that there is. If you're experienced like myself, your eye is actually the best tool. One thing with your torque wrench, your mechanic, if you're borrowing your torque wrench from your mechanic, he'll kill you if... Oh, I just gotta sit down here for a second so I can show you. Where's my puppy? Your mechanic will kill you if you don't zero out your torque wrench. And you want to do this when you put your torque wrench down. If it's going to be sitting for any period of time, always back your torque wrench out to 0. If you don't, it could damage the torque wrench, and you don't want that. Usually I go all the way down to where it starts to not go anymore, and then I move it up to the next 0, and then I'll lock it like that. So that's what I do. Now disassemble it. Anyhow, this is a real thorough job, but okay, now let's just pretend your handlebars are still bent. Now on this bike, it's different for every bike, but usually on a motocross bike these days, you've got your handlebars, and then you've got your handlebar clamps, which are under this fabulous stock Yamaha pad here. Kind of like a dirt bike airbag. It's an airbag for a dirt bike. So you take your pad off here. It only goes on one way. Okay. So you got your handlebars and you got your clamps, and then the clamps themselves fit into little holes there. I've got 2 positions here for mine, so you can adjust them, but they fit into little holes there with rubber bushings. They're cone bushings, and so I removed mine before. As you see, these I did a pretty good job of straightening them. You're looking to see if the distance between this part and the handlebar is the same on both sides, which, as you can see, if I can get this straight enough, you can kind of see that the wires and stuff get in the way here, but it is actually dead on. Like I said, I've already done this though, but I'll show you again how to do it on video. Okay, so what you want to do, what's happened here is, like, my handlebars were twisted in the clamps and in the fastening bushings here, so I had to loosen both off. What you want to do first is unloosen your clamp bushing nuts down here underneath. That's why I took the number plate off. Easier to get at. These nuts right here, you want to loosen off those. So for that, you'll need probably your breaker bar, and I'm going to need a little adapter for that. There we go. Oh, make sure you don't trip on anything in your shop while you have your broken leg. Okay, so I put my adapter on my breaker bar. Oh yeah, and you need a 14 mil or so socket. 14 mil. And that small extension. So, because I've already done this, I'll just show you quickly how to loosen these off. I'm not going to actually loosen them off again because, well, I don't need to, but you'll get the idea. lefty-loosey, right? So even from, if you're looking at the nut from the bottom, you want to go left. So turn your front end so that it locks out on your steering tabs here. It'll lock out to one side. Now you have something to leverage against, right? If you need to, you can just put your bike on take your bike off the center stand and put it back on the ground, which I might do. So let's just pretend I did that and the wheels are on the ground. So everything here is tight, so that won't move. So we can put the bike on the ground again. So let's pretend the bike's on the ground. Now I just take my breaker bar, pull it to the left, which is toward my body. That'll loosen off. And then unscrew that nut. You might have to unscrew it all the way, because you might have to you probably have to remove that clamp and that clamp right off of the triple tree to do it properly. So same thing with this side. I want to get just a sec here. I want to move the cables out of the way. I found the best way to get them out of the way. Sometimes the throttle cable, you want to make sure you don't kink it up, right? So that goes to the outside. In general, it's a better spot to have it, is on the outside. Okay, the same thing. The next one, same thing. It gets pulled to the left. So lefty-loosey. So it gets pulled towards me. So I want to pull it that way. That'll loosen it off. Now once I've loosened it with the breaker bar, and take my ratchet, take your ratchet here and set it back to loosen. And now you can use your ratchet and you can loosen each nut like that, because it makes it easier than just trying to take it off with your fingers in case it's a little bit sticky. Okay, so once you do that, once you've loosened, actually before you take your nuts right off, you want to, if you've got to, which you probably, it's the best idea to do it anyway, because even if you can't see it twisted in there, it might be. It was really easy for me to see it on my bike because I have these little increments here with the little divot, and it clearly showed it uneven on either side. Both sides didn't, they showed different positions. So I knew that I had to loosen off the clamp bolts. You want to keep these clamp bolts in the same position, in the same location, so it's a good idea to mark them. All I did was mark the front bolt with a white marker, and then I put the left one, I put a little dot with a black pen. That's all I did. And then, you know, once you've got the bottoms loose and the tops loose, go ahead and reposition the handlebar and then tighten these down. This one gets tightened down all the way to the bottom. See, the handlebars are still loose. And you've got the bars where you want them. This gets tightened down all the way to the bottom. This gets tightened down all the way to the bottom. And then you just cinch this up ever so, cinch these ones up ever so snugly. And then you'll torque them after. And like I said, once you have those snug, you don't want to torque them yet until you get these ones back in and snug. So you pop everything out, pop those bushings out, and you might find that switching the bushings from left to right will help you, just in case there's any wear or damage to those to those pieces of rubber. Okay. Now, once you've tightened those up, yeah, your handlebars are straight. So now you've got everything straight. All we've got to do now, all you'll do now, turn your bars the other way. Let's just say you've snugged these up now. Now, we'll want to drop our bike down with the side stand here. We'll drop our bike down. That might pop out actually if I drop it down with it in there. So what I'll do is I will drop this bike down. Remember, you got everything snug here. It's all snug. It's not going to go anywhere. Okay. Okay, take your center stand out. And I want to show you something too after. Put the side stand back in. Put the side stand back in. And now that everything is, the wheels have weight on them, now you've got something to torque against. Now your bars, your front end will be turned to the right. Now you can use a torque wrench. Get a bigger one though this time than the inch-pound one. That won't work. Say hi, Winston. Say hi. Say hi to everybody. Hey. So now what you'll do, just pretend this breaker bar is a torque wrench. Just pretend it's a bigger torque wrench. Now that I've got the handlebars to the right, I can now put that on there, and now I can push towards that way where my finger's pointing to the right. Righty-tighty. Generally, that's how most bolts and fasteners on a machine go. Right, tight. Left, loose. And then with the other side, same way. Torque it that way. Those, I think those are about 20-something foot-pounds. 28 or so foot-pounds. I like to keep them loose. I like to keep everything here on the, like, don't torque it to the max. Just so that if you hit something again, the bars and stuff like that and the forks will move instead of permanently bending, you know. So they'll move in place, and then you can just loosen everything and readjust it instead of having to replace parts, which can be very, very freaking expensive. So now everything's torqued, and if you haven't done so already, I'm just kind of doing a quick over here, sort of, a quick thorough. If you haven't already, you can now torque these ones, set that to tighten, and you can now torque these guys down. Boom, left and then right. You might have to move your front end. You might have to move it to the right now so that you can go against the stop. Okay, and you know, give those a little turn. I don't like to tighten them up that much. I like to leave them fairly loose so that you know. Oh, am I doing this upside down? Okay, I guess that was upside down. Sorry, guys. All right. Now that everything on there is tight, now see, remember how we snugged up the wheel? remember how we snugged up this lug here? One thing we could do. Now, it was snug enough to sit there and not move while I was moving those bars back and forth. Now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to use a torque wrench on these because this is a little bit more critical area to the whole frickin' front axle. So, you get out that inch-pound torque wrench again. That'll be fine because these are only 10 mil bolts, 10 mil metric bolts. Again, 2 stages, 150 inch-pounds, and then 180, okay? So we got 150 on there, because it's just 15 foot-pounds. The same as the fork pinch bolts, okay? Your manual might tell you that it's 16 foot-pounds or something, but big deal, right? It's just 1 little foot-pound, so it's basically the same. Now I want to make sure that it's on its tighten, and I'm just going to go ahead and do this in an alternating fashion again. So these are snug, right? And as I was saying before, what I kind of want to do, sometimes I look and see where that crack is, like where the split is here in your clamp. But that one's really too small to really tell or worry about. The separation between those to see which one's, you know, more spread than the other side. They're both about even. They're both pretty even, so I'm just going to start with the inside first. I'm going to start torquing the inside bolt and then the outside. That's a good starting point in general, inside then outside. If you're ever wondering, it's always good to go inside then outside. So you got 150 foot-pounds, lock your torque wrench, or 150 inch-pounds, sorry. 15, or that would be less, that'd be like 12 foot-pounds or so. So, till you hear the click. Till you hear the click. Do it again, alternate again. Just go until there's no more motion and it just clicks right away. Now go up to 180, which is 15 foot-pounds. Okay, 15 times 12, because you have 12 inches in a foot, right? Now I'll start, see the inside again. And just go, like I said, till it clicks. Alternate until it clicks. Good. Now you got everything, every possible thing cinched up. Holy crap, what's going on here? Okay, I messed it up there. Now you got everything cinched. You got, this is torqued to the proper spec. This is torqued to the proper spec. Those are still torqued. Okay, now everything's done. Your front end is straight. One last thing I'm going to show you guys. Actually, I should probably do it before I put the number plate back on. We'll get it back on the center stand here. Put the bike back up so that the wheels can sit there and hang freely. Okay. I want to point one thing out. Now, a lot of people don't really know this or whatever. See how my everything's pointed forward, straight ahead forward? If you turn your bars If you just give your bar a little push like that, and it continues on and falls like that and hits the steering stop, or it does that on the other side like that, well then your headset is too loose. See, this is exactly where your headset should be. See? Well, look. Now it stops, right? And it stops itself, but it still turns freely with no binding. Same with the other side. If I push it, it should not turn and fall into the steering stop and slap into that. That's not good. But this is good. This is what you want. Turn it in any position, and that's where it stays. That means I've got a proper preload. I've got this preload nut tightened properly, and I've got a proper torque on my steering stem nut, my headset nut here. And that's all. All we got to do now is put the final pieces back on, and we're good. Then you can go out and frickin' ride again on a properly aligned bike. Let's put your number plate back in the divots. What I want to do, this in there. Oh, cool. It's got a little installation divot there, so you can loop that while you're doing it, while you're putting it in place. Okay, that's cool. Okay, now that little nut for your number plate that I was talking about, you don't just put it back in. Every time you take a nut off your plastics or whatever, the bolt I should say, if you're a mechanic, you always use Loctite. If you're ever wondering why you're losing frickin' bolts coming out while you're riding, you come back home and you're missing bolts out of your bike. Oh, wrong one. It's because you're not using this stuff. Because you're not using Loctite. Every time you take it off and put it back on, you put a little Loctite on the threads. Now, you will not have your frickin' bolts backing out and flying out on you on the trail or on the track. You have fasteners that stay on your bike and keep everything tight and snug. Now, I'm going to grab my little 8mm wrench again, wherever that is, wherever I put that. Okay, and I put it somewhere somewhere where I cannot find it. Yeah, always try to put your tools back in the proper spot too. And if you're a mechanic, or if you're using your mechanic's tools, always put his tools back where you found them. If you don't want to get hurt. Now, I can't hurt myself because they're my tools. That wrench will work. Okay. Like I said, put Loctite on it. Don't tighten your bolts up too tight when you're putting it in your frame or the triple clamps. It's only aluminum. You don't want to strip it. Okay, now I've got that tightened in. I should have probably moved this beforehand, but I can squeeze my skinny fingers in there and pull that down. There. Okay, now your number plate's on. Good to go. Now you put your crash pad on. It only goes one way. A lot of these are aftermarket. Not every bike has them. If you have a crossbar, you have a crossbar pad. This doesn't have a crossbar, so it has the new style, kind of like Answer Pro Taper. They have a pad. Put this pad back on. Pretty basic. I don't really need to show you that. And we'll wrap up our video here. To make it easier, you might want to take out your vent hose while you're putting this back on. Just makes it a little easier. And get all the wires and stuff free and clear. It shouldn't be wrapping around any wires. All the wires are separate. They should be coming out of the bar and not getting wrapped up by your pad cover. Okay, so just pull the tabs tight on the cover. Pull the tabs tight, Velcro it into place. Every little piece has its importance, and every little part on your bike has its function. Keep your bike assembled properly, because if you don't know what it does, it probably has a function. So there we go. Perfectly straight, brand new bike again. Yep, after a big collision, a big wipeout, a big spill, now it's freaking brand new again. Oh, like I said, see, your fender won't really tell you if it's straight or not. Sometimes the fenders are, when they're mounted from the factory, they're not always like, it's not always perfectly straight. So there you go. Signing off. More videos to come.